Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doris Bergen, the Chancellor Rose and Ray Wolfe Professor of Holocaust Studies at the University of Toronto. And this year, I'm also the J.B. and Maurice C. Senior Scholar at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C. It's my tremendous pleasure to welcome you all to this special event today, honoring Elly Gotz, winner of this year's Wolfe Chair Holocaust Studies Student Impact Prize. Congratulations, Elly.
Thank you.
We're going to have a short prize ceremony, followed by a live interview of Elly Gotz with me and Tomaz Jardim from Toronto Metropolitan University. And we'll be sure to have time at the end for questions from you, the audience. And you can enter those questions anytime in the Q&A function. I want to start with some words of appreciation. This event is the annual Wolfe Lecture on the Holocaust at the University of Toronto. And I believe Elizabeth Wolfe is with us today on the call. I want to thank Elizabeth for her dedication to Holocaust studies and education at the University of Toronto, and for continuing the generous support of your mother, the late Rose Wolfe, Chancellor Emerita of the university. We are so grateful every day for your support. Huge thank you to the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies, our wonderful director, Anna Sternschus, whom you'll see presenting the prize. I want to thank also Galina Weissman and Natasha Rakiki-Fried for making this event possible, and a special enthusiastic thanks to Constance Chan, our fantastic events specialist, for everything you've done. Let me add thanks to Eli Yanni, who's been enormously helpful with this event. Thank you, Eli. And thanks also to Diana Tishko in the Faculty of Arts and Science for designing our poster. Thanks in advance to our brilliant tribute givers, Isaac Rosenberg, Leanne Gomes, Eli Yanni, Rachel Libman, and Jody Spiegel, and of course to my co-host, Tomaz Jardim, to all of you for being with us, and above all to you, Elly Gotz. Now, to get us started, we have a slideshow of images from Elly's life, expertly curated by Elly Gotz himself. So thank you for that as well, for your generosity and your skill. And now let's watch the images.
How was it?
That was fantastic. I'll tell you, jumping out from the airplane the first time, that's a strange, a scary moment. For 1 second, that was really, whew. And the air is cold, and it hits you. Fantastic.
Well, can we clap for that slideshow? And so many questions. Hi, my name is Anna Sternsches. I'm the director of Ann Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto. I also hold the position of Alan Malka Green Professor of Yiddish Studies here, and it is my pleasure and honor to be virtually presenting Wolfe Chair in Holocaust Studies Student Impact Award of 2024 to Elly Gotz. I suggest that our audience offers another round of applause for this significant achievement. I'm going to clap in real time. It is truly a special, wonderful moment to be sharing this with you. Thank you, Elly, for all your amazing work that you've been doing in the field of Holocaust education. As the award's title suggests, your work, your outreach, your giving talks, your lectures for large audience, and your conversations one-on-one have transformative effect on your audience. And we will hear about it for our tribute givers. But I do want to say from my own experience of knowing Elly for so many years and working with Elly in a number of contexts, first dragging my own children to listen to Elly's talk first when the book was published, Isabel Bader Theater, I think it was, and also listening to some of the school presentations for those children, glued to their phones. I will never forget how when Elly started talking about his experiences and told a joke about it. I will not repeat it because maybe somebody else will mention it in the tribute. I will never forget how the kids put their heads up. They looked up for the first time from their phones and started paying attention. This ability to speak to all generations of Canadians, school children, also, of course, university students. I don't know if everyone here knows, I think you probably do, but Elly is a fantastic reader of Yiddish literature. I remember many years ago, we hosted him in our graduate seminar for Yiddish studies, and Elly said to me, I'm going to use this opportunity to read Yiddish poetry that I enjoyed in when I was in school before the war in Kovna. And I have to say, I still remember the sounds of those poems. And I think maybe it's Elly's fault that some of the students decided to pursue women's poetry as topics of their dissertation. So it's on Elly also to develop the field of Yiddish studies, not just Holocaust education. Some of the people, by any measure, not all of them, are here today to speak about the impact Elly's work had and Elly's book had on them. So it is my honor to introduce them and ask them to give their tributes to Elly. I'm delighted to have 5 individuals in that role. So we're going to start with Isaac Rosenberg, who is the current undergraduate student at the University of Toronto. Isaac, welcome. Passing on the virtual microphone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isaac, and I'm a third-year U of T student studying astrophysics. I saw Elly talk for the first time when I was still in high school, and then several times in university. the most recent of which was a seminar he gave to a class of graduate students at U of T in Yiddish. Now, I don't speak any Yiddish, yet somehow through Elly's charisma and tremendous speaking skills, I was able to follow along. The story that sticks out to me the most from Elly is about how, in the ghetto, he said he would sneak to the synagogue to collect wheelbarrows full of books and hide them in his room. If caught, the punishment could have been severe, yet it was still worth the risk. He didn't get to go to high school, so these books were his education. And the importance of education is something that stuck with Elly, with the writing of his beautiful memoir, Flights of Spirit, and speaking to thousands and thousands of people around the world. Hearing Elly speak made me not taking reading books and my education for granted. It also inspired me to take classes about the Holocaust, and I know I'm not the only one. So I want to thank you, Elly, for your generosity, bravery, and the impact you've made on me and many others. Thank you for sharing your life story, and it's an honor to have met you and learned from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isaac. Our next speaker is Leanne Gomez, the graduate of the University of Toronto. Leanne, the virtual microphone is yours.
Thank you, Professor Shearness. Good afternoon, everyone. To hate is like taking poison and hoping the other will die. This is a phrase that I heard my grandfather and my mother say repeatedly throughout my childhood when explaining the art of forgiving but never forgetting. How we are called to compassion, humanity, and healing, especially in the predicaments of when others wound us. The only other time I've ever heard this profound saying was from you, Mr. Elly Gotz. This sentiment resounded both in your 2018 memoir, Flights of Spirit, and when I was fortunate enough to hear you speak to my undergraduate History of the Holocaust course almost 2 years ago at the University of Toronto. Yet I'm sure many will agree when I say that it isn't Elly's witty sense of humor, incredibly gracious demeanor, or kindness when faced with adversity that makes him such an inspiring light in the lives of anyone who has had the pleasure of crossing paths with him. It's his appreciation for creativity and innovation that is truly remarkable. From Elly, I learned to channel all the negative in the world into beauty. You truly possess a unique worldview and a handsome personality that's larger than life itself. A serial hobbyist, adventurer, accomplished businessman, and someone who wholly embodies the "I could do that" belief to his very core, you have inspired young people like me to champion tolerance and resilience in every facet of life. A very, very hearty congratulations, Mr. Gotz, and thank you for inspiring a generation of dreamers, inventors, and hard workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. And our next speaker is Elly Gotz, the PhD student in Yiddish Studies at U of T.
All right, I'm going to give my tribute first in Yiddish and then in English. A hartzigen Dank auch für dem, was ihr seid bereit, nicht nur sich zu teilen mit euren Überlebungen, nur auch zu passen, dem Teuchen und dem Stil von eurer Redes zu den Interessen und Bedürfnissen von euren Ziehherrs. Selten wenn gefindt man als ein Mensch wie Elly Gotz, was kann reden als so belehrendig und verhappendig wegen so viel Themes und auf so viel Sprachen. Was scheich die von uns, was vernehmen sich mit Yiddish, will ich interstrachen, wie prächtig scheint es ist, zu hören, wie ihr redet und deklamiert auf Mameluschen, und zu genießen von eurer Übergegebenheit zu der jiddischer Sprache bechlall und zu der jiddischer Poesie befragt. Thank you so much for being willing not only to share your experiences, but also to adapt the content and style of your talks to the interests and needs of your listeners. It is very rare to find someone like Elly Gotz who can speak so informatively and captivatingly on so many topics and in so many languages. As for those of us who study Yiddish, I want to highlight how wonderful it is to hear you speaking and reciting in Yiddish and to benefit from your dedication to the Yiddish language in general and to Yiddish poetry in particular.
Schönen Dank, Eli. It's wonderful to hear your tribute. And also, I'm curious if Elly wants to talk to you about dialects. I don't know, Polish dialect, Lithuanian dialect. We could always have that discussion further. Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Libman, the Chief Curator of the new Toronto Holocaust Museum.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to speak briefly today about Elly, my fellow Lithuanian Landsman. Over the last 15 years of working alongside Elly at the former Holocaust Center and now Toronto Holocaust Museum, I have been amazed, entertained, and inspired by him. Elly's role in the former museum was fairly involved, from logistics and technology to design and fabrication for multiple components. Elly's talents also extend to the physical. I once nervously watched him cut a piece of wood that didn't quite fit during an installation over his own knee. For those of you who know Elly well or who have heard his stories of survival and reinvention, this will not come as a surprise. His engineering know-how, analytical mind, and acute business sense that helped him survive were also helpful for us as we encountered various challenges in planning the new museum. Without ego or pause, Elly always shared his advice and notes, big or small. Recently, Elly helpfully suggested we pre-light wicks to make candles easier to light in advance of a candle lighting ceremony at a commemoration. Elly is ever energetic, youthful, and creative. He recently pursued telling his story through new holographic technology, inviting me and a couple of colleagues to a private demo at a local tech company to see his results and discuss their potential. While we witnessed Elly speak from inside a box, we all know Elly could never fit in any box. Elly's generosity of time and energy manifests in an extreme level of devotion to sharing his Holocaust era experiences and testimony with thousands of students each year. I am forever grateful to Elly for always saying yes if he could, and I hope to continue to work alongside you, Elly, for as long as we're able. The only time I saw Elly pause was during lockdown phases of the COVID pandemic. When I would check in, Elly would say that while fine, he and his beloved Esme were locked up like birds in a cage. Lest I feel too bad, he let me know that he read 33 books in the first few months. His lifelong devotion to all kinds of learning, no matter the circumstances, is beyond inspiring. Hating what he called unemployment from his favorite job, speaking to students in person, Elly quickly adapted to giving talks over Zoom. And now Elly is busier than ever, speaking to groups both virtually and in person. He is so clearly fulfilled from doing so, and we all know how meaningful and powerful these presentations are. With deep gratitude and affection, I wish Elly much continued strength, energy, and passion for this very important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And now Jody Spiegel, Director of the Holocaust Survivor Memoir Program at Azrieli Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I'm honored to have been asked to share some words in tribute to the remarkable Elly Gotz, whose life story serves as a testament to resilience and courage. 6 years ago, Elly entrusted us with the privilege of publishing his memoir, Flights of Spirit, now available as an audiobook narrated by Elly. Elly has been a Holocaust educator for more than 20 years, and the responsibility we felt in preserving his story in writing was immense. The publication could not merely document the harrowing events he faced during the Nazi occupation. It needed to carry the full weight of Elly's experiences over a lifetime to ensure that his voice echoes through the corridors of time. Actually, Elly's courage in documenting his survival goes back much further than 20 years. Over the course of publishing his memoir, our introduction writer discovered Elly's first testimony. In 1947, in Yiddish, Elly wrote of watching the Nazis and Lithuanian collaborators destroy a hospital and its patients in the Kovno ghetto. Elly wrote his testimony in Munich, Germany, for the Central Historical Commission, one of the first bodies to collect documents and evidence for Holocaust research. Although Elly has never shied away from bearing witness, from testifying to his own horrific experiences, and to speaking out on the suffering of others, the power of his storytelling comes from a place of acceptance, from being free of hatred, and from his refusal to be defined by his darkest moments. Elly's ongoing impact, as we've heard so far, his positive effect on students, it stems from his ability to connect. An internal engineer, avid businessman, innovator, adventurer, a pilot, and a skydiver. No matter what project Elly undertakes, he approaches it with passion for learning. His radiant smile and positive demeanor have the power to illuminate any room. In every conversation, his sense of humor shines. As we reflect on Elly's incredible energy and ability to share his story with students, we celebrate the optimism embedded in his memoir. Let his story and his messages serve as a beacon of light, guiding us through the shadows of the past and inspiring us to build a world where compassion and understanding triumph over hatred. Elly, your trust in us is a gift we hold with the utmost reverence. Your memoir will always serve as a reminder of the strength that can emerge from the darkest corners of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you so much. And thank you for publishing my book.
Thank you for those really beautiful tributes. And Elly, again, congratulations. Now we're going to turn to the next part of our program, a conversation with you, Elly, me, and Tomaz Jardim. Tomaz, thank you for joining us. And I want to just introduce you briefly and tell our audience that, of course, Tomaz Jardim is a professor of modern European history at Toronto Metropolitan University. He's the author of two fascinating books, The Mauthausen Trial, American Military Justice in Germany, and Ilse Koch on Trial, Making the Bitch of Buchenwald. Welcome. And Elly, you've known both Tomaz and me for quite a few years. You've spoken to many of our students on many occasions and to us also privately. But today we want to focus a bit more on your experience of those events, all the talks you've given and all the questions that you've answered. And speaking of questions, I just want to remind our audience that they can enter questions at any time in the Q&A function. And if you want us to say your name or a brief description of who you are, just put that in. So now, I want to start at the beginning. We just heard from Jody about the first testimony that you wrote in Yiddish in 1947. I'm wondering if you could tell us about the first time that you spoke publicly about your experiences in the Holocaust. What was it like? What made you decide to do it?
It was in 1984 or 85 in Canada. Until then, since 1947, I did not speak about the Holocaust because I found people didn't want to hear it. When we came to South Africa, our relatives said to my father, "Yudel, don't talk about it. It's too painful for you." But what they meant is it's too painful for them to hear. So I didn't want to speak. I went through university without telling my fellow students for 4 years, once even, where I was. I didn't talk. But in 1984, 86, there was a guy, Zundel, here in Canada. And Zundel published a book, Did 6 Million Really Die? And that upset us, all of us, the Holocaust survivors. We had quite a lot of them here. We began to say, we have to go to schools, we have to talk. And that is for the first time when I started to talk.
Wonderful. Well, first, Elly, it's just wonderful to see you here. And let me say, of course, that I'm so honored to be able to play even a small part in honoring you today. I just wanted to pick up with a question regarding your public talks. I've had the honor of watching you speak to my students so many times. And of course, I find your talk always extremely captivating, but I'm also very much captivated by the questions that my students choose to ask you and watching what questions they ask. And I wanted to ask you first whether there are questions that you perhaps never get, but wish that you did get, or seldom hear, which you wish you heard more.
Yeah, no one ever asked me, how did you feel when you sat in the basement in front of your mother, who was prepared to inject you and kill you if the Germans found you? No one ever asked me what it was like. What did I think at that moment? And yet it was a pivotal moment in my life.
Right. And I wonder, because of course, recounting these things, and perhaps sometimes people are shy to ask questions, I also wonder, however, on the other hand, I think we've probably all had the experience of seeing somebody speak and people asking questions from the audience, and everybody takes a bit of a collective kind of, oh. I wonder if you ever receive questions that you dread being asked. Are there questions that come up that you dread?
Not many, not many. I answer anybody, but sometimes I'm embarrassed in Catholic schools when they ask me, "Did God help you to survive?" Because I have to tell them I'm an atheist. I was an atheist before the war and I remained one. So I'm a bit embarrassed talking about it.
Sure.
Elly, can I go back to your first answer to Thomas's question and ask you, what did you feel in that moment? Can you tell a bit more? Because that's the moment you choose to start your book. And I'm surprised no one asked how you felt. Can you tell us now?
Yeah. I was sitting there right in front of my mother with my arm out, listening to the German soldiers talking outside the basement there. And I thought, what a brave woman my mother is. I was not afraid of dying too much. I was wondering what it will be like to die of a heart attack after the injection. But I thought, my mother, such a brave woman that she can do that to me. That was my thought.
That's an incredible thought. Since you mentioned your mother, I wonder if you could tell a little bit more about your parents and their responses to you. Did they ever hear you speak? Were they aware of the testimony you wrote in 1947?
Yes, my father knew that. I showed it to him. I wrote about the burning of the hospital in the ghetto, which was the first vicious anti-human action that I had ever seen. It affected me very deeply. I wrote actually that essay in the ghetto, and after Dachau, I remembered it and I wrote it again, almost verbatim, and left it there, and that is what they found in the history there after the war. But it was a deep felt experience, which I've never forgotten.
I wonder if I could actually pick up on that. I've noticed in your wonderful memoir, and I'm sure it's been mentioned a number of times already. If anybody hasn't read it, they must. I do notice that there are incidents that you describe in the memoir that, at least in the context of the talks you've given to my class, I haven't heard you recount. And in fact, the burning of the ghetto of the hospital in the Kovno ghetto comes to mind. I wondered if there are incidents in your memory that you choose not to recall when you give talks to groups of students, or if this is simply a matter of economy.
No. I'm willing to tell everything, but I only am given maximum an hour and a half, and in your class only 50 minutes.
That's
so,
true.
so let's face it, we haven't got time. But you see, I don't want to bore my teachers because they hear me year after year, twice a year. So I tell different stories at different times. So the teachers say every time, Elly, that story I've never heard. So I choose my stories variably. I don't tell the same story every time.
But you feel able to describe anything from your memory. I wonder, in that regard, I mean, do you think that there's anything about you as a person that allows you to describe? I mean, even the first answer to my question you gave about you wish somebody would ask how you felt in that moment when your mother was there with you, potentially about to end your life and your lives together. I mean, it's such an immensely painful and traumatic memory, and yet you wish you were asked that question. I wondered if there's anything that makes you as a person, in your mind, able, and not only able, but willing and determined to talk about these kinds of immensely important but painful memories, where other people who've gone through what you have might not be able to find the fortitude to do so.
I've learned from my father, you must always tell what happened to us. And he was very anxious to tell all the time to my children, to my grandchildren. He was anxious to tell. And I felt you can only tell if people want to listen. But if people want to listen, I will talk. I did not want to hide our history. I felt the world needs it, not because of me or my feelings, but we have to learn from history not to do it again. How do we stop genocide? We have to talk. And unfortunately, the Holocaust was not the end of all genocides. It continues in the world. I'm doing my best. I've spoken now to, in the last 20 years, to over 207,000 students and over 1,000 talks. I devote myself, now that I'm really retired for the 5th time, I devote myself to telling the story. I want the world to know.
Thinking about those 270,000 students and all those talks, I wonder if you could talk a bit about your perception of your audience's reactions. Are there reactions from students that you find particularly heartening, or maybe some that are more discouraging? And what about public audiences? What kinds of reactions do you notice, and how do they affect you?
You know, I get over, I have received, must be over 1,000 letters from students, and the most amazing ones from parents. What heartens me very much is when a parent writes to me, our son never tells us anything what goes on at school. But last night he came and talked the whole dinner in full detail of everything you told them. Mr. Gotz, you are doing an amazing effect. You have an amazing effect on the kids. That was very heartening, that the kids really hear me. And some of the letters are, by the way, very funny. One teacher of grade 6 asks all the kids to write a 3x5 card. Write to Elly what you think. And one boy, I'll never forget, he writes, "Jeepers, that was a good talk. Hunting crocodiles, riding horses, flying aeroplanes, and speaking 6 languages. I just play soccer."
It's adorable. Now, did you have some of those letters with you to share with us? Or you remember those ones off by heart?
I remember it by heart because that letter I couldn't forget.
That's incredible.
I get letters from students, but they say many times, the same sentence: "You have changed my life. I have realized that my problems are small problems, that I can go forward. It doesn't matter how I start my life. I can end up like you, successful." It gives them, for their own life, an insight into how you can make good even when you start badly, when life begins not good. One child even wrote, "I've even considered suicide recently, but I walk away from it when I hear you talk." That is very encouraging, that I get to the core of them.
Yeah. Oh, it's really profound. And I'm thinking about what Leanne said in her tribute about, revenge as the poison. We chose for the title of our talk a quote from you: "When I gave up hate, I started to live." And I also noticed in your slideshow an image that I know from my classes with the Indigenous boy, and the grandfather and the 2 wolves. I wonder if you could tell us where you got that story about the 2 wolves, and do people ever respond to it? I'm thinking especially if you have Indigenous students in your audience or others, how do people respond to that? Where did you get that idea about those wolves?
That story with the wolves, I found it. I was looking in indigenous literature for inspiration sometimes. I like to read what they write because when I came to Canada, it was so new to me. But I found this picture and the story, and I loved it. But that image remains with my students for years to come. I'm amazed. One night in a dark alley, a student recognized me. I had no idea who he was. He said, "Mr. Gotz, I don't feed the bad wolf." I said, "When did you hear me?" He said, 4 years ago in high school. I was very pleased about that. It's a touching story. The two wolves, that the wolf of hatred and bitterness, and the wolf of love and friendship. And the two wolves are fighting in our chest all the time, says the elder. And the student said, his grandson says, which wolf will win? The one we feed, said the grandfather, the one we feed. It's a memorable image that the kids walk away with and remember it years later. Every time I come to a university to speak, there's always somebody walks up to me and says, Mr. Gotz, I heard you in high school, and I've never forgotten. I don't feed the bad wolf.
Yeah, wonderful. I wonder, on this theme of hatred and the overcoming of hatred, as the quote suggests, you describe very much in your memoir that when you were liberated, you were full of hatred for the Germans, hatred for the Lithuanians who had sold you out, and that it was only in the overcoming of this that you really began to live. I wonder, with regards to your talks, I know you've spoken extensively across Canada, but have you ever spoken in Lithuania about your Holocaust experience, and for instance, in your home country? And I wonder if you could say something, and if you haven't, if you might have a reference way.
Never. They don't want to hear it. In Lithuania, it's the only country that has been denying the Holocaust for the last 75 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely upsetting. I've been to Lithuania. I took my grandchildren and my children to Lithuania and to Dachau. Germany is different. Germany has totally absorbed and recognized what they have done. Lithuania has never. They denied that their heroes are people who were murderers and leaders of murder of Jews. You can't talk to them. When I was in Lithuania visiting the ghetto area, I was standing on the very field where we were sorted and 10,000 people were taken to die the next day. And a Lithuanian journalist approached me, and he spoke good English, and he said, Mr. Gotz, you were here during the war? I said, yes. So what do you think? I said, well, I'm glad to be in Lithuania now because you've done so well. You are now free from the Russian occupation. I'm happy for you. He said, but I said, I also remember what happened in the ghetto when I'm afraid some of your people came to kill us. He said, thank you very much, and he walked away.
Wow. Remarkable. I wonder, therefore, I mean, you mentioned Germany and how the Germans have done a better job at coming to terms with this past and their role in it. I know that you do also travel to Germany. You have a number of times, I believe, in the last few years that you've been invited to participate in the commemoration of the liberation of Dachau, for instance. Have you spoken in Germany? And if you've spoken there, I wonder what that experience has been like.
Until very recently, I used to come every 5 years to Dachau. They never asked me to speak. They didn't know that I can speak German somehow. They didn't ask me. They had other people, politicians mostly. But one time I was there, and they were not organized well. They didn't know which hotel we were in. They didn't send the bus on time. So I complained. I said, what's going on here? In 1945, they were better organized than you now. They didn't like it, but they smiled, they laughed. But I've been to Germany now. I've participated in a film about Joseph Goebbels, which is coming out now. And I spoke at the university in München, where I applied in 1947 to study engineering. And now I spoke to 200 engineers, students, and I told them, I said, you engineers should have a Hippocratic oath like doctors. Don't do any harm. And I brought them some examples. It was a very touching experience for me to be at that university, the Engineering University of Munich.
Yeah, it must have been. Thanks.
That was quite something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Elly, you modestly did not emphasize to our audience that you gave those talks in Germany in German. I heard you sent it to me, the interview that you did, right, in German. And first, I was astounded by how beautiful your German is. Second, I shared that interview with Eli Yanni, who said to me, I don't really know German, but I obviously understand Yiddish. I said to him, listen to it, see if you can understand. Eli also understood every word. So I'm interested in the language question as well, both like what it felt like for you to be there in Dachau. You started to answer that with Tomaz, but could you tell us more? And also about actually speaking about your experiences in German, in a language that you learned under, well, you could maybe tell us a bit how it is that you speak German and that you pulled it out of yourself all those decades later.
I was as amazed as you are about my German, because for 75 years I haven't spoken a word of German. But when I came there, I said to the driver, let me try and speak some German to you. I haven't spoken for 75 years. Ah, he said, Mr. Gotz, you speak very well. You must speak in German in the film. I said, no, I don't think I can do that. But the director of the film made me do it. He said, you are fine, speak German. It is a bit of a disadvantage to have known Yiddish as well as German, because sometimes I must put in a couple of Yiddish words, which the Germans understand. But I was amazed that I remembered it so well. A couple of languages still stick with me out of the 6 that I've learned. I've forgotten Lithuanian. I don't speak Russian at all well, although I can read it quite well. And Norwegian, I have forgotten. But Yiddish, German, and English, I still know well.
And I know that you know that well because I've heard all of those languages, but I feel like you still kind of evaded the question about your feeling of the speaking, right? So the skill of the speaking, I know, you have, and I also know you spoke in Yiddish. Isaac mentioned it in his tribute about your Holocaust experiences. I'm wondering, does it feel different for you? Both the different audience, but actually talking in the language of your family, in the language of the perpetrators. Is there a difference in your own kind of experience?
Well, I love to speak Yiddish. I mean, when Anna Sternsis invites me to speak to her Yiddish classes, especially the longer class who know quite well, I mean, I love to read the poetry. I love to hear it myself because I don't hear it often. And then I like to keep them in stitches by telling them jokes about Helman Aronim and the Motke Chabad. I had them laughing there. They heard real Yiddish, folk Yiddish stories. To speak German gives me pleasure. I must say, I don't have any hatred towards Germans. I don't feel that. I don't forgive the people who have hurt me, the bad people, the perpetrators. I don't forgive them. You have to ask for forgiveness to be forgiven. And even then, some can't be forgiven. But I don't feel a resentment to the Germans. I feel that they have a wonderful culture, that the literature is fantastic, that they have done so much for music and for art and for science. You can't condemn a whole nation. You can't feel a hatred to a nation because of what some people have done. I don't feel that, so it gives me pleasure to speak German.
I wonder, so much of what you talk about is sort of about this process of overcoming hatred and embracing the in this case the Germans as a nation. And I wonder, of course, your life was permanently changed by your Holocaust experience, but I also wonder if you've been changed by the process of speaking over the last 40 years to the students that you see. Do you find that your life is enriched by your public engagement, and are you changed by it in the process?
My strongest feelings in speaking is admiration of the teachers, I must tell you. I consider teachers the most important part of society. We are bringing up the next generation, and they do it with such devotion. I'm so impressed by the teachers that I meet. They are wonderful people, everybody, at universities, in schools, in high schools, in junior schools. The teachers are the devoted people of our society. I admire them greatly, and I aspire to be a teacher like them. I enjoy doing it. It has changed me in some way, I'm sure. It has made me more willing to share, more willing to talk. I mean, sometimes, you know, you want to sit quietly and read a book. You don't want to talk to people. But I suppose I'm an extrovert, but I get pleasure out of what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think you very much communicate that when you're speaking. With regards to sort of introversion versus being, you know, in front of a group of 100 people speaking about your experience, you mentioned reading a book. To come back to your memoir again, I wonder how you found the experience of writing your memoir in comparison to, in fact, standing and interacting in that extroverted sort of way with a group of students. Because I know, I mean, you're completely right. The students love you so much, and you talk about how they write letters to you and they really connect to you emotionally, and I can see how much they get from it, and also how much you appear to get from it. But again, I wonder about the process of putting this down on the page and how that compared for you as an experience.
Well, you are a writer too, so you know how difficult it is, but I can tell you, for me, it was really hard because I'm not a writer. And when I wrote my first chapter, I decided I have to write down, I have to put down a book. I wrote my first chapter. I showed my wife, Esme. I said, have a look. What do you think? She read it. She said, it's terrible. It's no good. You write like an engineer. I said, I am an engineer. What's wrong with engineer writing? She said, no feelings. You just write about facts. So I rewrote it and I put in a little feelings, not too much.
Sorry.
Yeah, the greatest help came from the editor. I mean, my editor, Ariel Berger, she did, of the Azrieli Foundation. She did a fantastic job. She made me put it together right. She helped me a great deal. I'm very grateful to Berger. Fantastic work.
It's such a wonderful book. I wonder, was there anything in the process of writing that kind of brought out new memories or things that you hadn't thought through or had to describe in such detail or had to connect from one event to the next in any sort of way?
No, I had to sieve. I couldn't tell everything, even in the book. I couldn't tell everything. It would have been too big a book, and it would have been too hard work, quite frankly. So I think the book is a small book. I wrote it for grade 10 students. That is my intention. I'm writing to grade 10 because I was already speaking for many years when I wrote the book. So the book was an attempt to give a little of the essence of what I went through. I didn't tell all. I didn't tell all.
Yeah, well, it has a full essence, that's for sure.
I want to go back to the first part of Thomas's question and your answer, where you mentioned how Esme read that chapter and said, no, you write like an engineer. I remember hearing that from years ago. And I wonder if you could tell more about, I guess, the partnership between you and Esme in kind of the work that you do. I've noticed many times, I didn't check here the participants list, but maybe Esme is here listening, I don't know. Many times, of course, she accompanies you to your talk, your first reader. I also know that the two of you worked very closely together with that collection of interviews of Holocaust survivors from Toronto, summarizing, preserving them. Can you talk more about your relationship with Esme, your wife, and how it's part of, I guess, your own achievements as a speaker about the Holocaust?
You know, my wife, Esme, is a very loyal wife, and we are still in love after 65 years. But one day, our Rabbi Bielfeld, Arthur Bielfeld, whom we had known for 50 years, said to Esme one day, Esme, I have heard Elly's jokes at least 20 times, and you must have heard them 60 times, but every time he tells a joke, you laugh. That must be the secret of your marriage. We work well together. We enjoy each other's company all the time. And she's always available to tell me right from wrong and good from bad.
This is a very, very important contribution and fortune to have such a person. What about other members of your family? Have they been present when you speak? Have they maybe learned things about you as a father or grandfather that they might not have known from inside the family circle? How do you connect your personal, let's say, and your public selves?
Well, I took my children and my grandchildren to Dachau and to Lithuania. I have 3 children, I have 6 grandchildren. And, except for one person, I took them all to there. I showed them the ghetto, I showed them Lithuania, I showed them Dachau. And my grandchildren have heard me talk in their schools all the time. Now I have 2 great-grandchildren, just born in the last 4 months.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That is a pleasure. They say amongst the Jews that if you have great-grandchildren, you are guaranteed a place in heaven. So I am not worried anymore.
That's incredible. Can you say a bit how they responded to that trip? I realize it's a whole, but that must have been a very emotionally intense experience.
My son, Reuven, invited me once to speak to his company in America, in the United States, about the Holocaust. So they said to him naturally, Reuven, will you introduce your father? He says, I cannot. It's too emotional. That tells it all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, speaking about the generations and Holocaust education, I wonder, first off, you know, if you have, I mean, of course, we all recognize that somewhere, hopefully far down the line still, there will come a time when there are no longer any survivors who can tell this, can recount their experiences in the first person to students. I wonder what, if you have sort of wishes, you know, for the future in terms of, you know, what form Holocaust education takes, and if you also have anxieties about the future in a world, you know, 20 years down the line when you know, there's nobody who can address these things in the first person.
I believe that the Holocaust will not be forgotten. We survivors have done our bit. We have left a huge literature. There are thousands and thousands of survivors who have written books like I have, and we have left these books as raw material for future historians and writers and students to read and to create new literature. Now it will be literature. Ours is not literature. Ours is memorabilia, remembering. But I believe that it will not be forgotten, that there will be people who will remember it and write like we now read history of the Italian and the Inquisition and the stories from the past. It will not be forgotten. I'm not afraid that the Holocaust as an example of extreme government ability to kill people will not be forgotten. It will act as an example of what not to do, even though we haven't yet learned as human beings how not to do it. And I also believe that grandchildren and great-grandchildren of survivors, some of them will want to tell their grandparents' story. There's a whole movement now of 3G, the third generation. They are talking. They are going to schools. They are telling their stories. They are acting in the museum in Toronto, the Museum of the Holocaust, which has just been created, a new one. They are acting there. They are working there. So I believe it will continue.
Mm-hmm. Is this something that you ever discuss with I mean, speaking of second and third generation survivors and the role that they may have in Holocaust education, is this something that you ever discuss with your children and grandchildren? Any a specific wish that they carry on and tell your story?
No, I haven't want to burden them with a need to do it. If they want to do it, they will do it. Perhaps after I'm gone.
Sure.
I did not want to burden them that they have to do it. They will choose. Some people will choose to do it.
Yes.
They all have my book to remind them.
Yeah.
It's really heartening, Elly, to hear you say you believe it won't be forgotten. And I also want to underscore something you said just now that I heard you say years ago. It made a big impression on me, where you said literature will continue. So now we have the works of memory, but we'll have the works of imagination and literature and artistic creation. And that, I feel, is really inspiring. And I'm also thinking about the project that Anna Sternches has done with the Yiddish songs and performance and so on. I want to ask you, if you think back to those first talks from the mid-1980s and all those years of speaking, not only in Canada, also in South Africa, in Israel, like I realized you've given talks all over, what are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed? Maybe in, I don't know, the way audiences respond, in the kinds of questions they ask, in maybe your own sense of the importance of what you're doing. What's changed over that time?
The most that I notice specifically is that the kids now, even grade 6, know about the Holocaust before I come. Before they didn't. Sometimes the teacher I used to say, have they heard about the Holocaust? I say, not yet, we are going to teach it next month. How can I start talking about it when they don't even know what we are talking about, the event in history? Now, it never happens. The kids know, even the young ones. So audiences are now able to feel more when I talk than they used to before. Before they were so shocked that they couldn't. Now it has become history. It's no longer the present, it's the past. So people can accept it more easily, but they are moved nonetheless.
And do you attribute that change to popular culture, movies, museums, or to more education that people have received? Where's that knowledge coming from?
Only from the teachers. Only from the teachers. Films and books and things. I mean, there are some amazing films. Spielberg made this film about Band of Brothers. He shows the liberation of Camp Number 4, Dachau. It was as if I was there. So that is impressive. But altogether, the teachers are the key to our knowledge.
I can't help asking, I mean, when Doris described all the places that you've spoken, and I know you really have spoken just dozens and dozens of times and in so many places and to such varying age groups. And given that you're so interactive with the students and they ask you questions, I just wonder if there's a few experiences that you have in your mind that really stick out as kind of, particularly poignant or memorable in all these decades of speaking to students.
What touches me most is when a student comes up and says, my grandfather is a survivor, but he never told me anything.
Right.
And they say it with such sadness. They say, now I understand, because there's always been a secret there, which was a black secret that I didn't know. That touches me very much. I hug those students. I feel they have really suffered by not knowing that there is something that they don't know. That is a very touching moment for me.
Do you ever, I have noticed that some students, you know, you mentioned even the student who said that they'd contemplated suicide or they were thinking about it. And I've even noticed with my own students that students really emotionally gravitate to you and I think share a lot. And you at times conveyed to me a few sentiments that you received in letters from my students that were quite, they wanted advice from you, perhaps they wanted your blessings on some things that they were thinking about. I wonder if sometimes you ever feel like you have to draw some kind of line with the people that you speak to, that if sometimes people want something from you that you feel uncomfortable giving, do you ever get into uncomfortable situations?
Yeah, sometimes I feel that their need is so great and I'm not the one to give it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes also it's very revelatory. One day a tall blonde student came up to me many years ago and he said, I live in Kitchener, and that is where many Germans lived. And I heard a very different story in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, we found out later his father was the SS. Canada took in a lot of war criminals, over 100. So I moved that student against his family, you know, and that is a sensitive issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't do it consciously because I didn't know he was in the audience until after. But I told him, read more books. Read more books. That was all I advised him. So there are sometimes very moving personal influences that students are seeking from me, and sometimes I can't give it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. I've witnessed that, and it's quite remarkable to watch your interactions with the students, and I think it speaks just to how much of an emotional impact you have on them when you speak. Thank you.
That's a really profound encounter to think about what it means for someone to get that kind of emotional resonance with someone. Elly, I see the questions coming in, so I think we're going to turn very soon to our audience. I just want to ask one last question, which is any questions that you wish Tomaz and I had asked? Anything else that you would like to make sure to get out before we turn to our questions from the audience?
I think you are pretty thorough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elly, for so patiently answering all our questions and for being who you are. And thanks to all our audience who joined us. And of course, to you, Tomaz, it was great to do this conversation with you. To our tribute givers, Anna, and everyone who made this event possible. And again, congratulations, Elly. And let's take a look at that slideshow again that you put together for us so generously. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank
and
you,
applause.
everyone.
One last thing, everyone. Before we say goodbye, let's give you a round of applause again. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the prize.
Thank you so much.
That was something else.
How was it?
That was fantastic. Oh. That was something else.
How was it?
That was fantastic. Oh. I'll tell you, jumping out from the airplane the first time, that's a strange, a scary moment. For 1 second, that was really, oh. And the air is cold, and it hits you. Fantastic.
Now, our program is formally over. The really special event.
I look forward to seeing you back in Toronto.
Yes, exactly. I'll be back. Okay. And thanks all. And yeah, until soon.